Today's Viewpoint has been underwritten by Badiato Real Estate, providing personal and professional real estate service since 1987. For all your real estate needs, call Diane Badiato at 402-690-4769. Linda McDermott with Fricke & Associates is an independent insurance representative, helping you with personal and business insurance, as well as your long-term care, life, health, and retirement needs. Come join the conversation at PoliticalInsidersReport.com, Nebraska's source for local politics. For visual messages with impact, Roger Snowden Media Productions. And now, here's our host, Chris Pierce.
Good morning and welcome back to Viewpoint with Chris Pierce. It's great to be back. It's getting a little colder out there. But you know what? What happens is this is the winter months, and people are going to start thinking about spring, summer, and maybe even buying their first home. You know, we all know that home buying is the ultimate American goal. And what we're going to be talking about today is those first-time home buyers. We're going to talk about some of the things you need to make sure you can do, some tips to help you out in finding the right home, financing, all those things. To help me, I've got two professionals. First of all, I've got associate broker Derick Lewin with PJ Morgan Real Estate. Derick, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. And from the opposite end, which is the financial end, we've got Brad Dexter from Regent Financial. So he's going to be helping us with, well, loans, what you need, credit scores, all those good things. Because, again, what we want to do by the end of our two-part series is that you guys have the tools to be able to get that first-time home and have a smooth process. Now, I want to put a little disclaimer here. I actually work with Derick at PJ Morgan, and Brad actually did my first home loan. So I know who I'm talking to. So guys, let's get into this because we've been in a bit of a roller coaster ride in the housing market, and both with what's available and trying to get mortgages. How has Nebraska and the Omaha market, I'll start with you, Derick, how has Omaha kind of weathered that storm?
You know, Omaha is a little bit unique. Compared to the coast, we don't quite get the highs and lows of the coast. So we're a little bit more stable, but we did see prices tend to fall. And now we're starting to ride a little bit of a coaster, if you will, back up. And we've got prices starting to appreciate. And part of that is a low supply. So that's forcing prices up because buyers don't have as many options.
And we're going to talk about the difference between a buyer's market and a seller's market.
Absolutely.
So Brad, you know, talk about foreclosures. We heard foreclosures for years, starting 2008, 2009, and I know that did affect Omaha. Did we have the same kind of downward and up in foreclosures as the rest of the country?
Well, kind of like what Derick mentioned, it's not the extreme that you see when you turn on the news. There's foreclosures here and there, but it doesn't affect, like, personally, I mean, it didn't have a big effect on me locally. I mean, I don't see a lot, you know, so I mean, a lot of the doom and gloom that you see is going to be on the coast, the bigger areas.
Now, is that because basically all the problems start on the coast, they make their way back into the center of the country, which we just happen to be fortunate to be at, and by the time it gets to us, things are getting better, so it doesn't hit us as hard? Derick, is that kind of how it works?
I don't know necessarily. I just think that on the coast, they tend to just see a little bit more people moving around, things of that nature, and prices being bid up. It seems like when their markets are hot, they're a lot hotter than what ours are.
Well, what I want to do is I want to go to a video. It's on CBS News, and it was back in 2007, and they were talking about how it was a buyer's market. So we're going to take a look at that video, and then we're going to come back and talk about it.
Remember the housing boom a couple of years ago? Prices were shooting up. Everybody was rushing to buy. Well, today's real estate market is very different, but also full of opportunities for first-time buyers. Financial advisor Ray Martin's here with tips to tell you how to get the best deal. Hey, Ray.
Hey, Hannah, great to see you.
So many of these first-time buyers are single women. Why is that?
Yeah, about a third of first-time home buyers single women. Only about 9% are single men.
Why not the men?
You know, as they say, single women, they're domestic and they're willing to nest. Men, single men, fear of commitment.
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
Oh my
God.
God. That first time home yet.
Even with houses. Oh my gosh. So if you're looking to buy a home, is now the time?
You know, a lot of buyers are saying that right now. You know, do we buy now here? You know, clearly it is a buyer's market. What makes a buyer's market is when there's 4 to 6 months of supply of homes on sale, fewer closing, housing prices are lower, sellers are listing homes for less than sellers were selling them for a year ago. It is a buyer's market for buyers. They clearly have the upper hand.
So here are Ray's best tips for folks looking to buy a home right now, and you say the first thing you should do is research your local market as a first-time home buyer.
And when a market has changed from a seller's market to a transition market now to a buyer's market in many places in the country, you need to know your local market. Conditions can be radically different around different areas. Some areas can still be strong. Get all the listings of all the comparable homes for sale in your market and all the comparable sales, what has sold. What you'll find out is particularly how long houses have been on the market, how long it takes them to sell. You'll also find out the price reductions that sellers are accepting when they do sell a house. When you see that they're willing to accept 10% less, then offer 15% less, because you know your seller knows that information too.
Okay, so you're working with a real estate agent, right? A lot of cases, they are representing the seller here.
Yes.
You're the buyer. What kind of questions do you need to ask your real estate agent?
You need a lot of information here. You know that old rule, don't be nosy and find out about people's business. It doesn't apply to buying a house. You need to know, particularly, you're going to make the biggest investment you ever made. Ask the right questions here. When did the seller buy the house? How much did they pay? Why are they selling? This is really important for you to know, besides all the particulars about the home when you make an offer.
All right. You also say to write things that are wrong. What do you mean by that?
Seasoned real estate pros will say, look for a diamond in the rough, or a house in a great location with a tired look. The right things wrong include it needs painting inside and out, it needs updated appliances, or a home that needs the floors to be refinished. These are things you can do later that don't cost a lot of money relative to the purchase price of the house, but when you do them, the value they add to your home is more than the cost of the upgrade. So if you can find a home in that kind of a condition, the seller's getting less traffic, realtors are less excited about showing the home, you'll be able to get a bigger price discount.
Very interesting. You also say first-time home buyers should get an inspection, and once they get that inspection and they find out what kind of repairs they need, they should deduct them?
Well, it's always a good idea to include a home inspection contingency in your offer to purchase or the purchase and sales agreement. When you do that, and it turns up major repairs like needing repair to the roof or roof shingles, fixing a leaky basement, removing an old or leaky fuel oil tank in the front or backyard, then you go back to the seller and say, look, I'm going to deduct the cost of these major repairs because I made an offer based on the house not needing these. Let's work through it. You know, I'll offer, if you'll reduce the price here for these, I'll make the repairs after I buy it. Just make sure you get firm bids from people willing to do the work so you don't get burned on the backside.
Now, a couple of years ago, sellers might not have gone for that, right? They would have just said, hey, take it as is, but now you're saying there's a little bit of wiggle room.
Take it or leave it is what the attitude was, but now buyers have the upper hand here. You know, in a buyer, you don't want to be too slow here. Prices may go down a little bit further, but mortgage rates have gone up 0.5% either as well too here. So you buy a house once, but you pay for it every month. Buy well and profitably, but get a mortgage that you can afford.
All right, great.
Well, we definitely heard a different story. That was back in 2007, and Derick, they were talking, this is a buyer's market. They were talking about the buyer has the upper hand. That's not the way it is now, is it?
Not at all, Chris. It was about a year ago, up until about a year ago, and now we're starting to see more of a seller's market.
Okay, what makes the transition? What turns the market from a buyer's market to a seller's market?
Well, locally what we've seen, and it can change in different markets, is a low supply of houses. That means the buyer doesn't have as much to pick from.
Okay, but Brad, do you think that one of the things we always heard was when the housing market, the bubble burst, banks restricted. Do you think that some buyers that were out there just could not get a loan because the standards went way too high?
It could be. You know, it cut out quite a few, but then again, it's not all that hard to get a mortgage. I mean, you're still able to go to your bank, and the guidelines have tightened, but they're not so tight that we've ut out a majority.
Talk to us just briefly, and you don't have to get into it a lot. You know, one of the problems that caused it was subprime loans. Explain to people exactly what that meant.
Well, subprime loan was, you know, basically a loan for your borrower with the sketchy credit. You know, maybe a previous foreclosure, credit problems. And it, you know, they called them in the day. They may even call them like a Band-Aid loan. So it'd be an adjustable rate where it's fixed for 2 years, while they had time to fix their credit, come back and get themselves into a fixed rate loan. But what you were seeing with the whole subprime thing is, you know, you had your stated loans where income wasn't being verified. So you had people in houses they couldn't even afford, which, you know, in turn, obviously, with their adjustable rate, you know, their income wasn't steady, and then obviously you're going to have issues with that. And
we'll get into the difference between an adjustable rate and a fixed rate mortgage later in the show. But Derick, they talked a little bit about condition of the home, how for a buyer, and that's who we're talking to, we're talking about buyers, that would you agree that a buyer should do an inspection?
Absolutely.
Now, there's a fail-safe for Nebraskans It's a seller property disclosure.
Yeah.
What is that?
Every seller in Nebraska's got to fill this form out. It's a 5-page form. It basically discloses anything that could be wrong from with the property, from the furnace and AC, plumbing systems, anything with a flood zone, the roof, all those sort of things that are big ticket items that could be wrong with the house.
So
the seller's
if
got to disclose.
if the roof had ever leaked, they have to disclose that they did fix it,
Yep.
or the basement leaked or whatever. So basically, when a buyer looks at a house, they get this form. So if they get that, then why should they do an inspection?
There's still things that could be on there. If the leak, they can still put that they don't know or that it did leak, but we think we've got it fixed. Things of that nature. They still want to get a home inspection. There's things, appliances that they could be in working order or may not be. Sometimes the seller hasn't always lived in the house for quite a period of time and may not know.
Okay. Brad, do inspections and the disclosure, does that affect the loan process, whether the underwriters, and maybe you want to talk what an underwriter really is, does the outcome of those inspections affect if that buyer can get a mortgage?
No, I get that question all the time, and actually that inspection is it's in place just for the buyer,
Okay.
they're getting a clear picture of what kind of house they're actually purchasing. As far as on the lender side, we have an appraisal done, which is it's not going to be in depth as an inspection. So the inspections are going to go through detailed everything. They're going to find.
So what are you
hopefully.
looking for? What is the lender looking for in their appraisal? What are they appraising?
Well, the appraisal is basically we're seeing what kind of collateral we're getting, what we're lending on, making sure the value's there. Obviously, the appraiser still will go through and notate any repairs that he can see, as he's doing his inspection. But mainly, the lender wants to know that our collateral is going to support the loan.
Okay. So, Derick, they talk about doing inspections and making sure they know everything. But sometimes you have specialty, because sometimes you want a roof inspected by a roofer, especially given that Nebraska and Omaha, we've had a lot of hail problems over the years.
Sure.
Is that it? Are you seeing that more people are getting more roofs inspected by specialists or by a general inspector?
Most will do just a general inspector, but I do advise some of my clients to get a roofer out there, get somebody who deals with basements, those sort of things. If they suspect water coming in through the basement, get a specialist there other than just your general inspector.
So we talked about how back then it was a buyer's market, and he had mentioned in the piece that you take from your inspections things that need to be fixed, and you take that off the price of the offer.
Sure.
If it's not a buyer's market, is that still legitimate, or they if they want the house, it's a seller's market, they sort of have to swallow some of that?
In the buyer's market, it used to be the seller would say, take it, whatever you want. But now you're starting to see some pushback from sellers where they'll say, I'm not going to quite give you the house and the farm,
right.
If you will. But there is still an opportunity for buyers to negotiate and get some money back for repairs.
Okay. Quickly, are there any areas that you've got to make sure you inspect?
Yeah, the main thing is your big ticket items, your furnace, your AC, your roof, structural, those sort of things.
All right, so when we come back, we're going to look at another clip from actually just this last summer and how the environment's changed.
Listen, I think it's time we had that talk. Now, I can tell that you really like this girl, but I think you kids move way too fast. I just need to know that you're using protection.
Dad.
So buckle up, son. And no sex!
Selling cookies is about
the big picture. You have to have a goal, a big goal.
something you and your team
Want to do in the world. We choose where the money goes. A trip, an adventure, helping people out.
helping a lot of people out.
And about the money, we
Are responsible for it.
handling it, managing it, tracking it, doing great things with it.
This is business.
Girl business
The biggest girl-run business.
in the world.
Did you think this was just about cookies?
All right, welcome back. We're here with Brad Dexter from Region Financial and Derick Lewin with PJ Morgan Real Estate. He's an associate broker with that firm. First part of the show, we talked about first-time home buying, and we talked about some of it's a different market. We looked at a clip in 2007 where it was a big buyer's market. But as we kind of talked about, guys, that's kind of changed, hasn't it?
Yeah.
we're going to look at the video, but Derick, do you think, has it changed a lot, or is there still some improvement to come?
It has changed a lot. I do think that there is still a little bit of improvement to come, but it really has flipped over to a seller's market.
Has it? Okay. So let's take a look at this clip. It's a clip from CNBC, and it talks about how actually first-time home buyers are being squeezed out of the market because investors are taking advantage of lower-priced homes.
Rates are rising, few homes are being listed, and they're facing competition from investors who want to rent the homes out.
With us now is CNBC's resident housing expert, Diana Olick. Also, Mike Aubrey, he's a realtor in the Washington, D.C. area and host of the new HGTV show debuting tonight called Power Broker. And Jared Jones is the president of Horizon Realty Group in Las Vegas. Diana, to you first. What's going on, and is this a problem for the housing market?
Well, you know, look, the first-time home buyer has always been the foundation of the housing market. They usually make up between 40 and 45% of all home buyers, but in June they made up just 29%, according to the realtors. Why? Because they're in competition with investors. They're usually looking on the lower end of the market, and while investors are usually all cash, the first-time home buyer needs a mortgage, and that is more difficult. And so they end up in this competition where cash is king, and they're losing out.
Mike, what are you seeing with respect to first-time buyers in the D.C. area? A lot of pressure on them?
Absolutely. I mean, the market is absolutely blistering right now in D.C., and I think Diana hit it exactly right on the nose. The problem is that underwriting standards are still so amazingly tenuous to get loans right now that the first-time home buyer has been pushed out of the market.
Jared, you're on both sides of the coin. You work with the first-time home buyers as a realtor, but you've also invested between $1.5 to $2 million in investment properties. Are there any benefits to the market from investors scooping up all these properties and shutting out the first-time home buyers?
Well, there's no question we all get excited whenever we have equity in a market where we've generally been on the bottom side of that coin for so long. But as the former guest pointed out, obviously cash trumps financing in a tough market. Sellers want a sure thing and they want top dollar, and that's what investors do. But I think there's a little bit more of a sunny side in the future. In the next year, I think buyers may actually get a baton pass from investors. Buyers that have been sitting on the sidelines, that have been getting beat out, I believe are going to be in markets where investors are not going to be interested in the high prices any longer. And pricing that earlier this year was extremely low, or the actual supply levels that were extremely low early this year, are changing in many of the nation's hottest markets, which means investors are being less interested in these markets, and buyers can get back in.
I've got to think, Diana, that actually the first-time buyers are very price sensitive. They would buy the payment, not necessarily the price of the house. And that is very related to what the interest rates are on loans. I was doing some research yesterday. $400,000 loan at 3.6% was like $1,800 a month. At 4.6, 4.7%, it's $2,100. That's $300 a month for a first-time home buyer.
And that's a lot, and that's why they're getting priced down. And also because home prices are rising at the same time that interest rates are rising, again, it's just a double whammy against that first-time home buyer. It's so interesting, like what he was saying, is that the investor is almost pricing themselves out of the market. We're hearing that investors are leaving the market, which could be good news for those first-timers. But again, with rising interest rates,
right, and they're stuck paying
power.
More, right, Diana?
Yeah.
They're paying a higher price now as a result, and they're paying a higher interest rate.
Yeah.
Remember, though, if I interject, there's a returning first-time home buyer. There's a buyer that bought 8 years ago with a subprime loan that is now short-sold their home. They're back in the market, and even though interest rates are at 4%, they're buying the homes at half the price they did 8 years ago.
How did you describe them?
It's a returning first-time home buyer, a redeemed
first-time buyer.
Well, you guys know that the definition of a first-time home buyer is actually someone who has not owned a home for 3 years. So you are going to start to see those people who were foreclosed on back during the crash, who are phasing out of foreclosure, getting their credit repaired again, and coming back to the market. Now, again, they're not going to get that great rate because of their credit history. They might have to go FHA. They might have a smaller down payment. So, again, it's going to be a rough road back for them, but they are coming out, which is the good side of all this.
Jared, Mike said the D.C. market is very hot. How about Las Vegas?
Las Vegas has still, on average, around 6 out of 10 home buyers that are buying homes are all cash. Whereas FHA, which is the model buyer, model loan, if you will, for a first-time home buyer, is only 1 in 10 right now. But we are seeing inventory inching up slightly, which is, Vegas is an epicenter market. When we start moving in one direction or the other, we usually do it to the extreme. So if we're inching up in inventory, I think that's an indicator that,
Yeah, I mean, the problem with that, Jared, is that investors are buying in cash. They're not going to live in those houses. And what you end up with is a synthetically overinflated market where a bunch of people are renting right now. And if those first-time or return first-time home buyers come back to the market, then doesn't that make the market in Las Vegas go back down again?
Well, here's the thing.
Thank you. Jared, we got to go. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right, we found out there's a much different environment than 2007 than the video we just saw, which actually was June of this year. So, Derick, drastic differences. One of the main points they were talking about was that first-time home buyers are being squeezed out of the market because investors are taking advantage of the housing burst and the low prices. Is that still going on?
You see that more on the coast again, but we do face competition. First-time buyers in Omaha will face competition from investors as long as prices remain lower than what they have been in the past. Absolutely.
Now, Brad, do you see here in our market, they mentioned that cash is king. In our market, has there been more cash transactions and our mortgage applications have went down, or is it about the same?
I haven't noticed a difference. On my side, I'm not aware of any of the cash transactions because we're not necessarily involved in that. But as far as once the rates have come up recently, you've seen a lot of the refinance stop, but it's almost strange as if the purchase market's picked up, at least on our end.
Just quickly, because you mentioned refinance, there was a huge refinance boom. And do you think that age is gone now? Because a lot of people, you and I discussed, I can't refinance my house. I'll probably never be able to refinance my house. So are we going to see refinancing go down, or,
You're always going to have refinancing because there's still products out there that are great products. Obviously you take advantage of the interest rate. The VA, for instance, will allow you to borrow up to 100% of your home's value for a cash out loan, which is unheard of. People are always going to be refinancing. I know in my office alone, there's loan officers that'll strictly just work on refinances.
And I wanted you to mention about underwriting. Can you tell us a little bit about underwriting and kind of what the standards are? Because as a lender says, we talk to lenders a lot. Well, my underwriters wouldn't approve it.
Yeah.
Well, who are these underwriters?
Well, obviously there's guidelines set in place by, you have your FHA, VA, Fannie Mae, and the underwriters are there to basically, it's almost as if they're going down a checklist, making sure everything's there. But ultimately, there's always going to be issues where there's something open to interpretation, or the guidelines are always not so straightforward. So you have to have an underwriter there to kind of do their checks and balances.
So, Derick, we're going to talk a little bit about 7 tips for first-time home buyers, and we're going to kind of go through these a little quickly because we're going to really get into meat and potatoes in part 2 of our show. But basically, the first thing it says is check the selling price of comparable houses in your area. Why comparable houses?
That's the first and best way, really the only way in residential real estate to determine a fair market price. Okay. You need to look at the comparable homes in that area, and maybe some would say even in that street, and that needs to be time sensitive. So the last 3 months, the last 6 if you can't get enough comparables in the last 3 months.
So Brad, the next one's going to go for you because it says see what you can afford. All right. So are you talking about what I can afford in a mortgage payment, or there's more to a house than a mortgage payment, isn't there?
And that's the one thing people need to understand. I think as a first-time home buyer, there's not really a class, and there's nothing that prepares you for that. Fortunately, with the media and everything, I think our buyers are becoming more educated, so they know. But you'll still get a lot of people that will get into a house and not realize the extra cost it's going to come with.
And that's what it says. It says number 3, discover your total housing budget. Besides your mortgage, what else is in your housing budget?
In the housing budget, you're going to have everything from your utility bills, cable, anything you can think of, trash, all that. But then you also have to set aside for unexpected repairs because, as you all know, as owning a house, you're going to have things pop up almost routinely. So,
Derick, this is something that I know when you work in real estate, you hear about it. Number 4, don't let closing costs surprise you.
Yeah, absolutely. And a good.
What are closing costs?
Closing costs are the cash that it really takes to close on your loan. You bring this check basically to the closing table, and that's what it takes to get the keys. And a good lender or a good real estate agent should be able to estimate those costs within a few $100s.
Okay, so this is above and beyond probably what the loan's going to be.
Exactly.
It's kind of like a transaction fee to get it all done. And that's your title and all those kinds of transfer fees, stamps.
Ensuring that you get good title, the state documentary tax, those things.
So, and we talked a little bit, Brad, about number 5. Look at your current housing budget. Does a new house fit? So basically, if you're living in an apartment, that's where you live. can you afford a house? Is that basically what it's asking you there, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, if you're living in an apartment and relatively, if you think you can afford a little bit more than what you're currently paying for rent, like we kind of talked about before, you got to take into account other expenses that are going to come with it. You know.
Derick, back to you. Says talk to a real estate professional. I'm not sure why we would do that, but when do you think someone should start that process?
You know,
is that something early on?
Yeah, it is absolutely early on, because a real estate agent can help, like a good lender, can help with a lot of these questions that first-time buyers will have, and a good experienced real estate agent will help with these things.
And then finally, remember, your home is your largest investment. Look at the big picture. What do they mean by that, Brad?
You know, as far as your largest investment, you know, it's something that it's a 30-year mortgage, so you're going to be in there for a long time. And largest investment, obviously, is the price that you're going to pay for it, but. You know, the big picture is how long are you going to stay in the house? You know, are you going to walk away down a bunch of money? You know, because you're going to use it some people will use it as a stepping stone, buying their first house. You use the equity to put down in your next home. So you kind of have to look at all those different aspects.
So Derick, quickly before we got to wrap up this part, you know, how long is the average first-time home buyer? How long are they in their first home?
You know, I'd say probably anywhere from 3 to 7 years.
So by about that time, they're looking at the next home.
Exactly.
So that's probably, you know, they've started a family and they need more bedrooms. Okay. All right. Well, guys, we've got to wrap up this part one. When we come back next week, everybody, we're going to take you through the home buying process from making that decision all the way to closing the loan. And we've got these two experts, both on the real estate and the finance side. And we're going to talk about the types of loans and some of the catches and some of the things you don't want to miss. Because one of the last things you don't want to do is get yourself underwater with something that you can't afford. So until next time, remember, everyone has a point of view. Respect it.
Selling cookies is about
the big picture. You have to have a goal, a big goal.
Something you and your team
want to do in the world. We choose where the money goes. A trip, an adventure, helping people out.
Helping a lot of people out.
And about the money, we
are responsible for it.
Handling it, managing it, tracking it, doing great things with it.
This is business.
Girl business.
The biggest girl-run business
in the world.
Did you think this was just about cookies?
Welcome. Good morning. You're watching Viewpoint with Chris Pierce. This is part two of our first-time homebuyers show. Basically, our goal today, and as it was last week, is get you guys prepared that are thinking right now, while it's cold and everybody's inside, about spring and summer, about buying your first home. So by the end of our shows, we want to make sure that you're prepared to give yourself the best chance of getting the home you need, the home you want, and really get you that dream home. And with me today, I've got associate broker with PJ Morgan Real Estate, Derick Lewin. Derick, thanks for coming back.
Thank you, Chris.
And from Region Financial, Brad Dexter. Brad. And as I did the first show, I know both these gentlemen. I work with Derick, and Brad got me my loan for my first home. So he did a great job. No plug, just tell you the facts. And I'll take the check later. Anyway, so last time we talked about how the market has changed since 2007, and recently we went from a buyer's market where buyers had their choice of homes. Now it's kind of reversed. Now it's the inventory's kind of dried up. There's not as many homes available. Investors took advantage of a lot of homes for investment and rental properties. So now what we're going to talk about today is the entire step one home buying process, from the very beginning of deciding if you're ready all the way to closing that loan. So let's start there, Derick. Let's start with, how does one decide if they're ready to buy a home?
You know, if you're in an apartment, you know, you're thinking about buying a home, you've got to be financially ready and mentally ready. There's certain steps to take. One would be to get with the lender and discuss the finances and make sure financially you're there. And then mentally, you got to be ready to take on all the extra things that come with buying a house.
So without getting specifics, Brad, with the loan, because we're going to talk about that later, Derick mentioned, are you financially ready? Just quickly, what is the standard percentage that you should set aside of your income for housing?
Well, you know, mainly with as far as down payment's concerned, you can get by with 3.5% down.
Okay.
But then again, you also have to factor in closing costs, and that's going to be at least another 3.5%, maybe even more. Unless the seller's willing to pick that up. But it's always good. I would always advise people to have at least their down payment plus maybe another 5% in savings.
Well, let me ask you this: if someone's actually in a let's say a 3-bedroom apartment now, they're paying, let's say they're paying $850 a month. Are they in a position to go out and buy a 3-bedroom home?
Then again, obviously it depends on their income, but for the most part, probably. Yeah, I mean, it just around here, a 3-bedroom home isn't going to run you what it would run you on the coast. So I mean, you can get by with a decent payment. The one thing you have to factor in are the property taxes.
Right.
That's going to drive your payment quite a bit.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Let's talk about this because we don't really go. But your mortgage is actually 3 things, right? What are those 3 things?
As far as a mortgage,
I mean, it's your actual house payment, but then it's your taxes and insurance.
And in some cases, you'll have your private mortgage insurance, which is the PMI.
Okay. All right. So, second thing, I don't know why we're talking to you, Derick, but it's get a realtor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why can't I just go out and say, there's a house for sale, I want to buy it? What do you bring to the table for me?
This is, for a lot of people, most people, this is the single largest investment they're going to make. It pays to get professional help. And in most cases, a lot of people don't know this, but you don't pay a lot to get a licensed agent to help a buyer. Most of the commission is paid for by the seller, so it's almost free advice.
So buying a house is really, you're just having to get the mortgage, but don't be surprised by the closing costs, which we talked about before. Right. But what other services? So if a new home buyer comes to you, says, I want to buy a new home, what do you do?
Absolutely anything from finding them a lender, finding the home. I'm going to be obviously there showing them the homes, going over the offers with them, telling them what's expected in those offers or what's normal in this market, going through the home inspection with them and what's normal to see on a home inspection of this type of home, whether it's an older home or a newer home. All those sort of things an agent will play an integral part in.
Derick, or Brad, the question I had is, I have actually seen an increase of homes for sale by owner. How does that affect you in any way? And when you're not dealing with a real estate professional on the buyer side, okay, but how does that work with the seller? Do you deal with the seller at all?
Well, technically and legally, I'm not really allowed to advise the borrower as far as that process, so it can get a little bit tricky. I have to watch what I say and because they're going to ask me for advice, and essentially I'm trying to cover the job of a real estate agent that's not there because it's a for sale by owner transaction. A lot of times I'll try to refer them to the title company, and they can be a little tough because you need that communication from the real estate agent.
So for a lender, if a lender has 2 parties that are represented by realtors, is that a much smoother transaction than if one is representing themselves and another one has a real estate agent?
Yes, I mean for the most part it's going to be a smoother transaction because as long as there's good communication, and the lender has to communicate to the buyer's agent, and the buyer's agent will relay it to the seller's agent. You can also have the opposite where maybe the one's not communicating and the chain of communication gets thrown off.
All right, number 3 is get loan pre-approval. Now, in the industry, and Derick, we were talking about this off air, but we were talking about, we use, in the day you could get pre-qualified by your bank, but what's the difference between being pre-qualified and being pre-approved?
Pre-qualified is as simple as a phone call through the application process. And the lender's going to ask you a series of questions throughout the process, and say, yeah, you're pre-qualified. It sounds like you're going to meet those qualifications. To actually get the pre-approval, you want to meet with the lender. They'll have you bring in your tax returns, W-2s, pay stubs, things like that. We'll go through and we'll verify everything, and then we'll issue that pre-approval, usually with no other contingencies on there.
So basically, what you're saying is you'll be able to provide, if they use you as a letter to anybody saying this person can have a mortgage, is approved for a mortgage at X dollars.
Right.
Now, Derick, how does that help you if someone comes to you with or without a pre-approval? Let me ask you this: would you go out and show homes to someone without a pre-approval letter?
It's tough because you don't know exactly what they can afford, and typically I might go out and show them a couple of homes, but at that point, if they're really serious, I'm going to want them to sit down with a good experienced lender and hammer out the details of what they can afford. You don't want to show them homes over the price that they can afford or severely under.
Why not severely under? Because they're just not getting the home they could afford?
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
okay. And the fourth one is look at home. So basically, they've got a letter from Brad or from someone and said, I can get a mortgage for $150,000. Now it's time to look for homes. What do you find that first-time home buyers are looking for?
You know, typically it's anymore. It's about a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. Trying to get a 2-car garage. You may not always get that here in Omaha, but that's about the typical house that first-time home buyers are looking at.
Now, but we also have to talk about this isn't just for houses, but people can buy condos. So you know, I would assume even trailers and things like though those are still can be used as a mortgage to go shopping for, correct?
Absolutely.
So when they're searching for a home, what kind of services or what do they use to try to find those? I mean, they don't drive all over town, do they?
Right. No, the internet's become huge in real estate, and there's a couple of sites out there that everybody knows. But your agent can still help you find homes through the MLS, the multiple listing service that all agents subscribe to and are able to communicate with other brokers from.
So, Brad, I know that you really don't care what home they got, but to go a little bit back before when we talk about appraisals, because they may, Derick may have someone that's found a home, and they've been approved for $150,000. So they see the house. But let's say when you do the appraisal, that house doesn't appraise anywhere close to 150. How does that affect?
What happens there, and actually had this happen the other day, the value came in under the purchase price. You're basically left with a couple options. The first option that we usually do is we'll have the agent pull another set of comparables. We'll submit those into the appraiser and see if he'll do a reconsideration of value. Possibly he missed a comparable or two, just little things that maybe he overlooked. The second option would be to actually go back and renegotiate the purchase price. Obviously you don't want it to throw the deal off, but hopefully it's within a range to where you can renegotiate it and make the deal happen.
Because Derick, he's right. You don't want your client, your buyer, to pay more for a house than they should, correct?
Absolutely.
Have you ever had an incident where people have had to walk away because something like that happened? I mean, is that common?
I haven't. What most experienced realtors will do, and this is why I say get a good experienced realtor, will write a contingency in the contract that the home must appraise at or above the purchase price.
So that purchase agreement, there's some protections for the buyer.
Exactly.
And actually protections for the seller as well.
Correct.
Okay, good. All right, when we come back, guys, we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts about making those final choices. We're going to talk about funding. We're going to talk about some loan types when we come back. So we'll be right back.
For 45 years, Family Housing Advisory Services has been improving quality of life by helping people achieve housing and financial stability. FAS prevents homelessness, educates homeowners, provides foreclosure prevention options, develops financially wise consumers, offers affordable mortgage lending options, eliminates housing discrimination, and reduces poverty. Programs and services include homebuyer education, tenant services, financial management, tax assistance, homeowner finance, and fair housing. For more information, call 402-934-7921.
Listen, I think it's time we had that talk. Now, I can tell that you really like this girl, but I think you kids move way too fast. I just need to know that you're using protection.
Dad.
So buckle up, son.
And no sex!
Do you know about 211? It's help for an elderly relative or a troubled teen, family counseling, or job training. Instead of hunting for phone numbers, dial 211. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, talk to someone who will find the local information you need. United Way and its statewide partners want you to get connected and get answers. Dial 211 or go online at ne211.org.
Welcome back, and I don't know how I forgot this, but I need to let you guys know we're still here at the Milton R. Abrahams Public Library. I try to tell everybody that because this is a great facility, it's a great library, and make sure you go to your local libraries. That's one of the things that your tax dollars pay for. and you should enjoy them. You can come and not only sit down and read books, but they have internet services, and they also have job services. If you're looking for a job, they can help you find one via the internet and those search engines. So anyway, back to the show. I'm here with Brad Dexter and Derick Lewin. We're talking about first-time home buyers. We are in the middle of our basically home buying process, and where we're going to start up with is choosing your home, Derick. We talked about out there we're looking. So kind of describe to us what a first-time home buyer needs to be looking for when they make that final decision, because this could be final.
Yeah, typically a first-time home buyer is not going to have a ton of cash set aside for anticipated repairs, things like that. So kind of back to the inspection point, they want to make sure that the furnace, the roof, structurally, the house is good to go. Otherwise, they want to have those things budgeted for.
Mm-hmm. So when you've got multiple houses that, I'm sure a young couple, we love these houses, how do you help them narrow that list down?
Yeah, what you want to do almost is come up with a pros and cons list. Why do you like one house over the other? What really suits the needs of you and your spouse if you have one, or kids if you have any. And moving forward down the line, like I said, they're going to probably stay in this house 3 to 7 years at least. You want to make sure that you're not just looking at now, but in the future as well.
So how often do schools, public transportation, parts of town, how often does that go into, is it more that is made more, or is it the actual house itself? Which seems to make that final?
It just depends on the buyer, more than likely. For a family, schools are going to play a huge part of it. But typically, those are certainly factors, but it is more of the house and what comes with the house.
All right, Brad, we're getting to you. This is the meat and potatoes of home ownership. It's funding. Get funding. There's a lot of different types of loans out there. Talk to us about some of the loans that are available, but not just for first-time home buyers, but for what are the typical home loans that are available?
What we see a lot around here is you'll see your conventional loan, which is your traditional loan. Up until the 15th of November, you can still get in a conventional loan with only 3% down. So you could still, you have a lot of first-time home buyers doing a conventional loan.
Now, just so everyone knows, when you say 3% down, you're saying 3% of the purchase price is a down payment?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So on a conventional loan through, well,
it actually changed on the 15th.
Oh, okay.
So now it's 5%.
Okay.
Require 5%.
So they have to have 5% cash down to get a conventional loan. Okay.
Obviously the one that everybody's familiar with is the FHA loan. FHA is actually, people will associate that with a first-time home buyer. I've had people even think that it means first-time home buyer, but it's obviously not. It's the Federal Housing Administration. That's a 3.5% down payment. The credit guidelines are going to be a little bit more lenient on that, and the debt-to-income ratio, you could go a little higher on that. So I mean, it's going to open the door for quite a few more borrowers.
Talk to a little bit about, when you talk about first-time home buyers, that debt-to-income ratio. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So basically the ratio is going to be your total monthly obligations. Now what they're looking at is just what's reporting to credit. So they're going to look at your auto loans, your credit cards, and then they're going to compare that into ratio what's your actual total monthly payments in conjunction with your income. And they're always going to go off gross income. So that's, they're going to look at the ratio. You want to be at least right around, you can go up to 55% on an FHA loan, which it seems odd, it seems pretty high, and it's still, for the time being, it's allowed.
Now, everyone knows what a credit score is. First of all, why is a credit score important, and where do those play in the loan approval process?
They can play, obviously they play the major part. That's the first thing you look at, it's the first thing you talk about when you're talking about a mortgage, at least on our end. You're going to require a 640 credit score, and you're going to have tiers, from a 640 to a 680, 680 to 720, 720, 740. And each tier is going to give you a little bit better interest rate. FHA, for the most part, the rate's not going to change all that much, but once you get into conventional, you could talk at almost a 2% swing as far as interest rate.
Yeah. Okay. So, but there's also, and I think this is an important loan with, we have a military base just south of us in Bellevue, and given that there's a lot of military families coming back from Iraq and Iran, but the VA loan, and talk about how great the VA loan is.
The VA loan is obviously, that's kind of my niche. That's what I love to do as far as the loan, if there's such a thing as loving doing mortgages. But it's a 100% loan, for a VA borrower. Which
now, what do you mean by 100% loan?
It means you could get into the house with no down payment. Essentially, if they can get into the house, there's no down payment. The seller's going to cover their closing costs, prepaid items for their taxes and insurance. they can get in the house, nothing down, and in some cases they can even get their earnest deposit, which is the deposit they put up front when they put the offer in. They can actually have that refunded back to them.
And I think that's important because there's a lot of veterans don't know how great that loan is. Now there's other kinds of loans. There's the USDA loan.
USDA.
And I think, does Gretna still qualify?
Yeah, Gretna. You know, there's I know Columbus, Nebraska is finally no longer eligible. But you know, your perimeter areas outside of Omaha are all still going to qualify. And then obviously Lincoln's would be out of the, you wouldn't be able to qualify that area. But it's, you know, not going to be when you think rural housing, you think out in the middle of nowhere, but it's still going to qualify in your smaller towns outside of the Omaha area.
So what's really important is that you got to make sure that you've got a lender that that goes through all your different options, because there's not such thing as just a mortgage. There are so many different mortgages that they have different rates. You know, we talked about, you know, PMI, mortgage insurance and things like that. So probably getting that loan is probably the most important thing outside of choosing your home in this entire process. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, most definitely.
So Derick, you know, we got the funding. He knows that I know that I can afford this $150,000 house. Now I have to make him an offer. It's not just as simple as I'll pay you $150,000, you take it, I give the keys, is it?
No, absolutely not. There's all different kinds of things that a buyer can ask for in this contract. It's not only the purchase price, but it's, do I want a home warranty? When am I going to close on this house? Will I take possession before closing, after closing, right at closing? A home warranty, all those sort of things can be negotiated in the purchase price.
Now, is this also when you do offers, you know, when you do your inspections and say like the driveway's cracked and you want to replace it, is that the time, well, we're going to offer you this money, but we also want this list of things done? Is that when you do that? That'll happen after you get an accepted offer and you do your inspection, those sort of things. It's almost a whole nother negotiation period. Really? Okay. Yes. Okay. So finally, the next thing is get insurance. What do we mean by insurance?
It's just insurance is just almost, it's going to be the same as your car insurance, but it's going to insure your property. So you're going to have to, the lender is going to require you as the borrower to have enough insurance to cover the loan.
So as a first-time home buyer, I've never had a home. How do I know? Do you give me insurance as the lender? Does my real estate guy get me my insurance? Or do I talk to my State Farm guy who I've got a car insurance? I mean, so where do I get my homeowner's insurance?
Well, if you wanted to go to your State Farm guy, that would be a great start. You know, it's good to always get a couple quotes just to see where everything matches up. But I mean, anybody that's going to offer car insurance usually will offer your homeowner's insurance. And it's always good to maybe look at bundling those two together, because you're going to get a discount on that premium as well. Now
in Omaha, I think you and I talked about this, that Omaha actually has some areas that require flood insurance now. Yes. And that's pretty expensive. How can that one thing affect whether or not you buy a house?
I'll give you the example. There was a deal I know of. I had a friend doing a deal, $80,000 house. Homeowner's insurance was $800 a year. Flood insurance was $2,400 for a yearly premium. So it can be a big factor.
And that's a big issue, especially on the outskirts of Omaha.
Absolutely.
So finally, we're closing the loan, Brad. We've got all the things between the lender and you and the real estate that you ought to come together. Talk about closing and how that's probably, for a first-time home buyer who doesn't have kids yet, is probably the most important day of their life. Talk about what closing is.
Well, basically the closing takes place, you know, it's when you show up and you do your final signature. So you're going to show up and everything's finalized at that date. The closer's going to go through all the documents and you bring your cash to close at that point.
Oh, I'm getting signals. Our banner's falling down behind me. So okay. So, Derick. So, what? I got to get back on track now. So, at closing, this is when hopefully the owner gives the keys to the new buyer, right?
Correct.
So, after they've done that, actually, is there anything else that the real estate or the lender, do you guys do anything else, or is it done?
You know, sometimes you'll get calls from the buyer that this isn't quite right or that isn't quite right. A lot of times real estate agents will give a gift to a new buyer, things like that. But at that point, after closing, there's not a lot that your lender or real estate agent will do outside of making sure that you've got your appropriate documents to make payments.
Okay, let me ask you this important, and for both of you guys, what happens? I buy my house, we do closing, and suddenly there's a huge problem. Let's say, you know, a week later, the basement floods. What do I, as a home buyer, do I have any repercussions at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be probably more on the real estate agent side, but, you know, I always tell people at closing, any issues whatsoever with your loan, anything, contact me. I'm always available. And then I can kind of work to get them to the right place, to talk to the right person.
Yeah, the first thing would be to call your insurance agent.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I called my insurance agent because I didn't have flood insurance. Are they SOL?
You know, they need to look at what was disclosed to them through the process,
right.
what the home inspection uncovered, and kind of start from there. And so probably real estate agents won't like me saying this, but the first thing you probably need to do is talk to your real estate agent.
Okay. Well, that's good news. Because, and I think you mentioned it, a home warranty. Is that something you would recommend?
It just depends on the situation. Home warranties cover certain things. It's probably not going to cover your basement flooding.
Okay, so my basement flooded. I'm SOL. I have a new swimming pool. All right. I want to thank Brad and I want to thank Derick for coming in. And when I come back, I'm just going to do a quick wrap up. I think it's important. First-time home ownership. My wife and I, we've owned our home for almost 18 months, and we actually enjoy it. It is a game changer in your life. So, but we'll be right back.
My son, the Cub Scout, helped raise money to make camping safer.
My son, the Cub Scout, stood up to the school bully.
My son, the Cub Scout, volunteers at the homeless shelter.
My sons, the Boy Scouts, helped clean up after the devastating flood.
My son, the Eagle Scout, helped save a man's life.
My sons, the Eagle Scouts, are defending our nation.
My son, the Eagle Scout, became a doctor,
civil engineer,
police chief,
wonderful husband and father,
state senator.
Join Scouting2012.org.
50 years!
The Boys and Girls Club of the Midlands
Have been helping kids like me. Like me.
Like us.
For just $30 a year, I can get
a healthy meal,
homework help, exercise, a safe place to stay after school every day. At one of our 8 clubs. My name is Janelle.
And I am the Boys and Girls Club.
The Boys and Girls Club. We are the Boys and Girls Club! Like us on Facebook at BGC Midlands. Cox will donate $1 to the Boys and Girls Club.
Fighting politicians, political parties, fighting each other and amongst themselves. You are caught in the middle, bombarded with talking points for and against every issue. You turn to the news to get the full story, to understand both sides of the issue, to help cut through all the rhetoric. What do you get? Talking heads with the same ideology and rhetoric you already got from the politicians. When will the attacks on you stop? When will you get the full story on the important issues, so you can form your own opinion and not just conform to others? Viewpoint Television with Chris Pierce is the only place where the talking points stop and a real conversation begins. A conversation where all points of view are presented and debated so you can decide your own opinion no matter what side you choose. Let's make sure the conversation continues with a second season of Viewpoint. You can make that happen by making a contribution today. Viewpoint Television, covering every point of view.
Home ownership is the American dream. And for a first-time home buyer, it's probably one of the scariest things that you can do. Trust me, I just went through it about 18 months ago. But I couldn't be prouder of my home that I own. So I hope that this show gives you a way to prepare yourself to keep that process smooth, because you could get tripped up very easily. So make sure, find a good home, find your dream home, make sure you can afford that dream home, and then make sure you get everything you want. And we talked about contingencies and things like that. All those work in your favor. Now also remember, as a buyer, you don't pay commissions. So it really costs you nothing to buy a home other than the purchase price. Make sure you find yourself a good real estate agent. There's a lot in town, and there's always a referral service for the Omaha Board of Realtors. So with that, I want to thank you guys, and we'll have some resources in our closing credits where you can find out more information about what it takes to be a first-time homeowner. And with that, remember, everyone has a point of view. Respect it.